Hello and welcome to this Wednesday's morning markets briefing. Got lots to talk about, but firstly, Bitcoin swings sharply after a false claim that the SEC approved ETFs, as well as that United and Alaska Airlines find loose parts on Boeing 737 Maxes. Got lots to talk about in the charts, also with lots happening on the economic calendar. We'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure you subscribe. The first article to talk about, of course, is Bitcoin. Now, current cryptocurrency prices, swung sharply yesterday following a false post by the SEC on X, formerly known as Twitter, regarding the approval of the first ever US spot Bitcoin ETF. This post declared that the SEC had finally approved Bitcoin ETFs on all exchanges. Now, we've been covering this kind of topic for many months now. I mean, this goes back to some of the first videos on the channel where we were discussing the possibilities of the SEC approving Bitcoin as an ETF for many asset management firms. Now, since the start, really, the SEC has been so hesitant of approving a Bitcoin ETF. It does seem that those, classic worries associated with cryptocurrencies are also those maintained by the key financial regulator of the SEC. Ultimately, of course, these Bitcoin ETFs will not be able to go ahead, and customers of these key asset management firms and the asset management firms themselves won't be as able to kind of cash in on the growth of cryptocurrencies in the modern age unless the SEC approves it. And this is why we're seeing such kind of rallies within the cryptocurrency market at the moment, as more and more investors believe the SEC will approve Bitcoin ETFs. Now, if we do go back quite a bit of time, a court did rule, of course, that the SEC was kind of rejecting these appeals and attempts to establish a Bitcoin ETF. They were, they weren't approving them, and they were rejecting them on kind of arbitrary and random kind of basis, and not really, a fair kind of judgment on these ETFs which could exist. And therefore, it is now believed that the SEC is more likely to approve these ETFs, and now we're seeing that Bitcoin market rally as a result. But it does seem that this post by the SEC was not done by any official, but in fact, a hacker, a poser, and therefore, someone which maybe even tried to exploit the market to their gain through doing this. So it would be interesting to see the fallout from this as we do get into it. Now, the news immediately, was picked up by business news websites, including Bloomberg and social media as well. And only 10 minutes later, the SEC chair announced that the X account was compromised and that the SEC had not in fact approved the listing of Bitcoin ETFs. What's interesting to see out of this is kind of the response by the markets and how quickly they were able to respond to this, very recent news. So immediately, we saw a rally to the upside for Bitcoin, and that was within 10 minutes. Since within that 10 minutes, we then did finally get the chair of the SEC basically saying that this was a false claim. So kind of seeing that and having that greater volatility for Bitcoin just as a result of the approval by the SEC does show how much this does matter. And as we do go into the rest of this week and we do wait for the SEC's kind of message and approval or rejection of Bitcoin ETFs, we will then, see this kind of volatility increased, because ultimately, we'll actually have time for the markets to fully price that in. Whereas we only had 10 minutes since an X post, an unexpected X post which came out. So it's very important to keep your eyes on this, as the volatility on Bitcoin is, of course, off the charts. We'll come to that on the charts near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can go over that and see that. But yeah, so definitely keep your eyes on the Bitcoin market and Bitcoin news. Bitcoin is one of the few assets, I think, which actually depends a lot on the news from social media sites like X, let's say, where I think many investors frequently kind of checking and keeping their eyes on, because that is really where cryptocurrency has its fame, is on social media and in these kind of more consumer friendly circles, I guess. So keeping your eyes on these kind of areas is so important indeed. Now, following the fake post, Bitcoin rallied, gaining 1.5% on the day, and after it was announced that the SEC chair had not approved these ETFs, we did see a reversal of minus 3.4%, so significant volatility in such a short period of time, and a great sell-off which followed that period of a rally. So that's so interesting to see, to kind of get an insight into how we might actually see markets react to the decision this week. If we do get the decision, we may be sitting around that 1.5% mark up, or we may add on that 1.5% to that 3.4% reversal, and that sort of thing. So it's so important to kind of keep your eyes on what's just happened, so what might happen if it does get approved or rejected. Now, a post came as investors wait to hear the SEC's decision on the matter this week, with at least 11 asset managers having applications pending to launch a Bitcoin ETF, including asset managers such as BlackRock, Invesco, and Franklin Templeton. Now, the SEC also faces a deadline of Wednesday to approve some of the applications. So that's why investors were so kind of on the edge of their seats. And that's why we saw such volatility after this approval, is because we were kind of waiting for that news anyway. Now, the SEC does obviously face that deadline, but the SEC has been hesitant before, and investors are more optimistic now. And so far, Bitcoin has gained about 7% on hopes that SEC will grant approval. So that's something that's interesting to note. We didn't see as much of a gain as we did see a reversal after we found out that it was a fake post. So possibly we do have more downside opportunity from this decision than we do have upside. It does seem that the markets are pricing in an approval. So if we do see a rejection, we could actually be seeing a greater sell-off than we would see a rally if we do see an approval. So that's something that's definitely important to note, with several applicants already receiving feedback from staff that an approval was possible this week. So that's why we're kind of seeing this pricing on the upside. However, the SEC has forever argued that Bitcoin ETFs do not have the same protection to investors as traditional investment products due to their risky and volatile nature. So that's always important to note as well. Now, the current pending ETFs are solely to invest in Bitcoin, unlike previous products which have kind of offered similar. So definitely keep your eyes on this. We've been talking about it for quite a while, but it's an important one to keep note of. Now, an article that we've kind of returned to a few days now on a trot is this incident with the Boeing 737 Maxes and the effect that this may have on the Boeing's stock. So, we might move through this article a bit faster than usual. Now, loose parts on some grounded United and Alaska Airlines 737 Maxes have been found, with United coming out and stating that bolts needed more tightening on the door plug. Now, this obviously comes following one of those Boeing 737 Maxes operated by Alaska Airlines seeing its mid-air blowout happen on a door plug on the fuselage. And obviously this is very, very significant, as it presents a very large and serious kind of safety risk for all the people on board. And we've seen great fallout from this incident already, despite having no casualties, no injuries or anything like that. We did see a great fallout on Boeing stock, I believe declining 8% on the day on Monday. We might come to that on the at the end on the charts as well, but ultimately this has had a negative impact, of course, on Boeing stock and its supplier Aerospace Systems, I believe. I may have got that name wrong. But their supply has also seen, a dip to the downside. But ultimately, they were very lucky on Alaska Airlines to have no casualties or injuries, because ultimately this could have been a very, very, fatal accident, really. But luckily enough, nobody was sitting where the kind of that part of the fuselage came loose and blew away. Ultimately, though, this is stoked fears within the airline industry, as many worry about whether this could happen on other Boeing 737 Maxes, with United saying the operations team would fix the problem before returning to service. And this is in relation to United coming out and stating that bolts needed tightening on the door plug of certain 737 Maxes. Now, this drove Boeing's share price down further, closing 8% down on Monday. This news comes following the door plug on a MAX 9 run by Alaska Airlines did blow out at 16,000 feet in the air whilst flying from Oregon to California. Despite this, nobody was hurt, of course. Alaska has since commented saying that technicians had indicated loose hardware was visible on some aircraft and they were still waiting for documents from Boeing. The US Federal Aviation Administration has also begun formal inspections with all MAX 9s with a plugged door being with any MAX 9s with a plugged door being grounded for the meantime by the FAA, with United having the greatest hit as a result of the grounding, owning 79 MAX 9s with this configuration. So having that door plug, United has since cancelled 200 flights, which is less than 8% of its flights on Monday. Meanwhile, Alaska Airlines has cancelled 22% of its flights. So a significant hit for Alaska Airlines, plus of course the public fallout in relation to the issue. Investigations by the FAA are working with all airlines and Boeing currently. So this is so important to stay on top of. It'll be greatly affecting airline industry and Boeing stock, of course. Keep your eyes on it. That's all to talk about in the articles, though. Next to talk about, of course, is the charts, where we do have quite a bit happening. Not too much on where we need to start, though. On the US 30, US indices do seem to continue to consolidate. Now, yesterday we did kind of talk about that kind of those bullish candles, that we did see yesterday in yesterday's morning market briefing, but the price action which has followed yesterday's morning market briefing have not quite continued that bullish momentum. In fact, we're more so now seeing some bearish momentum as price does pull back to the downside. If we do look just here, we did see this strong bullish move to the upside. Here we started to maybe say, maybe this retracement that we were seeing is over, and now we're ready to continue a move to the upside. But ultimately, we have failed to continue this move to the upswing, and price has now settled a bit lower. So price is once again consolidating. It's hard to really say where price could go, but I think what will be interesting to hear this week is the US inflation figure and US producer price inflation figure, which will dramatically affect investors' perceptions on the Fed's monetary policy, and as a result dramatically impact US indices as a whole. So definitely keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about, though, is the dollar, which once again, there's not too much to say. The dollar is still hanging around this kind of range that we've noted between these two key liquidity zones. Price hasn't made a significant move to the upside nor downside. It does seem kind of restricted to the upside by that key liquidity zone And we're just not seeing that momentum to the downside. So once again, like US indices, I think that inflation figure that we are getting this week for the US will be dramatically important for kind of understanding where the dollar may go. Next to talk about is Euro USD. So still on the topic of the dollar, and once again, we're still seeing this kind of consolidation, this ranging motion that we are seeing. Obviously, last week's NFP figure surprisingly had very little impact on Euro USD, largely because it did come in quite close to expectations. But ultimately, we were kind of expecting some moves from it. But we've really just stayed around where we were even a week ago, and price is still consolidating. Not too much is happening, but euro dollar, of course, it's so important to keep your eyes on, as we will be getting that US inflation data this week. So that's so important to note. Pound yen, though, is an interesting one to keep your eyes on, because not only are we sitting in a very interesting position just below that key triple top level and key liquidity zone, but we also do have the Bank of England's Governor Bailey speech today. He, of course, does kind of lead the way with the Bank of England, so understanding his rhetoric helps shape investors' perceptions on the British monetary policy, basically. And so understanding what the British monetary policy may be, the Bank of England's monetary policy may be, helps us kind of see where the pound may go. So definitely listen out for the Bank of England's Governor Bailey's speech today. That will be so important, as we may even see price break through that key triple top that we have seen form as a result of that speech. So definitely listen out for that. That's an interesting one. Next to talk about, though, is Bitcoin. Obviously, we've already kind of discussed Bitcoin, but here we can kind of contextualize, those kind of price movements that we were talking about. So here is, the significant candle, that significant 4-hour candle, which represents the, initial move to the upside, that dramatic upswing that we did see, and then that dramatic swing to the downside that we have seen since. Ultimately, though, prices kind of settled near where we were yesterday. So arguably not too much has happened as a result of that kind of that malarkey that we did see on the charts, on the news article. Sorry, but what's interesting to note, whilst we are seeing a great deal of volatility, so maybe this isn't as relevant, but on the RSI, we are seeing this kind of bearish divergence form. So it'll be interesting to see how that may affect the charts, going into today. Keep your eyes on a possible move to the downside as a result of that. I do have the Fibonacci retracement tool marked out on the charts just at the moment to note those areas where price could also retrace to. So keep your eyes on all of that. Next to talk about is gold, which of course is in a very interesting position in that, it is sitting around those key liquidity zones, but at the same time, we're not seeing too much kind of momentum to the upside or the downside. So at the same time, it's not that interesting, but keep your eyes on this. The US inflation data this week will be very important. Regional tensions within the Middle East once again are so important to determining where gold could go. So listen out for any news on escalation in relation to that, as that may dramatically impact where gold could go in the future. So keep your eyes on the news. Lastly, to talk about on the charts, of course, is oil, which is did engage in this retracement, in contrast to what we were talking about yesterday and the day before, where we were kind of seeing this downside momentum breaking through that counter trend line. And we have noted here, price is currently sitting around that 61.80. Maybe we'll now see a sell side move, considering we're also sitting at that key liquidity zone, but definitely keep your eyes on all of that. That's all to talk about on the chart. So lastly, to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, where we do have quite a bit of interesting data coming out today. So firstly, we will be getting French industrial production figure, as well as that we're getting new Chinese yuan loans, as well as that we're getting an ECB's officials speech. So ECB Guandos, I probably pronounced that wrong, but we are getting a speech from one of those ECB officials, so listen out for that. As well as that, we're getting Italian retail sales data, not too much, not the most important Eurozone data, but definitely something to listen out for as well. As well as that, we're getting US mortgage applications data, as well as US wholesale inventories data. And most importantly, in my opinion, we are having the Bank of England's Governor Bailey speak today. So definitely listen out for that to understand, what's going on with the Bank of England. That's all from us at Wildwood Capital, though. We've talked a lot about on the chart. We've talked about a lot of things on the charts, lots of things on the articles, and lots on the economic calendar. But that's all from us once again. Hope you have a great trading day. See you later. Bye.